Well, I'm looking forward to talking about the Little River Band. And did you catch that iconic band in concert? Did you see them in their early days? Did you see them in one of their many iterations? Because we know that there's been a changing of the baton of the members. Derek Pellicci, a long-time drummer with Little River Band, lifetime drummer with many other projects, creator of music, co-writer of music, joins me now with a new single to share and a new album to celebrate. It's brilliant to have you in the studio, Derek. Thanks so much for joining me.
It's a real pleasure to be here, David.
Now, this is a question that Charlie Pickering wanted me to ask, and it's one that Greg in Geelong wants me to ask, and that is the name of the band. Is it related to that little sign that we see on the way to Geelong Little River?
Absolutely. The short story is we were driving to a gig, I think maybe the Colandina Hotel down in Geelong or somewhere like that. We were all sitting in the car. Glenn Shorrock might have had a guitar sitting in the back. He was sort of like looking around, looking for song inspiration, and we saw the Little River exit sign. And he started messing around saying, gee, that's a nice evocative, I'll come up with something. And then a few minutes later he said, that'd be a great name for the band because, the band before Little River Band, which Graham Beebe and I were in, Graham Goebel, Beebe Birtles and I were in, was called Mississippi. We had a big hit in 72 with a song called Kings of the World.
Yeah.
We went off to England, kind of broke up over there. It didn't work for us because punk had hit really big. And so, we were in the wrong place at the wrong time. And but we met with Glenn Shorrock and we met with Glenn Wheatley, and we all decided we'd come back to Australia and form a band back here. And so we worked for the first couple of weeks as Mississippi. And then Glenn had said, look, I've got, I'm a new singer in the band and new entity and all that stuff. So he was looking for a name. And so Little River Band it was. And yes, it was. On the way down to Geelong.
It's almost the antonym of Mississippi.
Yeah, it was incredible. One
of the biggest rivers in the world suddenly becomes Little River Band.
Yep,
it's perfect.
Yep.
LRB, that's now sort of synonymous with the band. That became your acronym or your initialism.
Yep.
And it's also astonishing to think that you've been so prolific over the years. And I'm looking at I think there were 13 top 40 hits. I mean, that is really scoring above your handicap there.
It was, and I think that's still a bit of a record, really, that we'd held on charts. Look, we were just shooting so high. We were a little bit disappointed. The only Grammy nomination we got was for Best Vocal Group Performance for Lonesome Loser, which I think the guys should have won.
Yeah.
I can't remember who won that year. But yeah, we never got a Guernsey, and that was a bit disappointing. But and still not in the American Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I think what did that, David, and we won't get into this because it's so political, but because there's currently a Little River Band out touring in America that doesn't contain any of the originals and doesn't contain any Australians. But I think that held it back. I think people were thinking, well, there's two entities. There's the past Little River Band, there's the present Little River Band. And so we had that trouble when we were in the Australian Hall of Fame.
Your life, please, we need to have either a documentary or an autobiography because you've got so much behind you and so much in front of you with your new creation. But in the fact that you came out here as the old 10-pound pom, I think you're only about 7.
Yep.
Then you found yourself at the Southern Cross Hotel. You would have been about 11. You clapped eyes on the Beatles.
Yep.
Which was life-changing, transformative for you.
Yep. Yeah, literally an epiphany. I don't like using that word too often because everything gets overused, but it was because I even wrote a song recently where I sort of said, I always forget my own lyrics 10 minutes after I write them, but I wrote something recently saying that, we were all just blown away by seeing the Beatles. It was such an incredible event. I'd never seen such a big crowd of people. And then I wrote in this lyric that I went home and I was the only guy that was permanently changed. Everyone after a time went back to their life, but I just stayed on that high. And then it was
high. You were 11 years old. How the hell did you see anything, Derek?
Well, my brother was 6 years older. It was his whole idea. I really hadn't discovered music at this time. I was just about to start school at Collingwood Technical School in Collingwood, obviously, and my brother went to buy his first car from Kevin Dennis Motors, for all those people of my age out there, and someone had traded in a drum kit. So my whole life was fortuitous. The drum kit
came from a car yard.
The drum kit was in the back seat of my brother's second-hand car. If he hadn't have bought that for me, everything would have, I don't know what I would have done.
And that was a little Trixon set.
A little Trixon drum kit. And stupidly me, I didn't realise what I had at the time. That was the first drum kit that Ringo Starr had.
Oh, no. And where is it now? The bottom of the sea?
I don't know what. I might have traded it in on a Rogers drum kit or something. But I think the kit I bought afterwards was a brand new Japanese kit from Brash's that was nowhere near as good as the one I had. I was just so naive, but I luckily discovered that there was a drummer inside me.
How did Collingwood Tech last? I mean, it seems as though drumming took over pretty much as soon as you got that set.
It did. I'm not saying this because I'm talking to a very learned gentleman in front of me here.
But you beat the beat. That's what I'm just following your beat on this.
Well, the only thing I was good at school, and I was really good at it, was English expression and poetry. And I lived on King Island for the last year and a half of my schooling in the Bass Strait there.
Yeah.
And I hated every minute of it because I was so far away from where it was all happening in the 60s in Melbourne. But I had a very English teacher called Mr. Potter who wore the black robes and everything. And he said to me, now I know you're leaving very early and I know you want to do this drumming business, but please don't give up your literature.
And in fact, poetry has been for you the seed that often plants the song. This is what, as we move into this next part of your career, as you're striking out in a solo tangent, you found that you put together the lyrics first, which is not always how people do things. And it's even without a melody in mind, you find that the poem actually starts to prefigure or help you to determine the melody. I'd love to talk a little bit about how that works in your mind, Derek.
Well, I've always done that, and I've always worked with people who come up with the music, and more often than not, it's not what I envisaged, and so. But that's the way I've worked for and luckily I had some songs on a couple of Little River Band albums and whatever. But I always had this
hits.
thing.
Hits. Yeah, we can't have self-effacement in the show. It doesn't work.
Well, they weren't really big hits. But when I quit the band in 1997 for the final time, I came back and I'd been writing for a while. I'd got into writing in Los Angeles when I lived there in '84, and I'd always had this, the lyrics would come first. And just to expand on the whole AI thing is, as I was saying to Tima out there, that I come up with a lyric and I feed it into AI. But then we start having a conversation, and I say, I want trombones, I want trumpets, I want a 60s, rock and roll band, and I want to hear the backing harmonies like the Deltones and stuff. And so I give it all of its directions. I'm driving it, but because I'm not a great, melody player, I never hear melodies as such, and I'm not a good enough guitar player to do it all on my own.
What the software is for you is a sounding board.
Exactly.
You're testing out how this might sound.
Yep.
And then from there you need to develop that and hone it and make it your own. In a similar way, we might say, give me 20 funny names for camel milk.
Yep.
And there's all these things like Sahara Silk and, Oasis Premium. And these are all beginning points.
Yep.
These are the building blocks for what you ultimately humanly create.
Yep.
My guest is Derek Pellicci, musician and former drummer for Little River Band, now striking out on his own at the tender age of 23. Or give or take. We don't need
give
to
or take 50 years.
I'm a letters guy, all right? Before we get to play your very tune right across Victoria, I've got to ask you, though, the whole world of, you mentioned AI, but really technology has been helping musicians for decades.
Absolutely.
And it seems funny that we put so much stigma upon AI, and I guess it's because it's a little bit more insidious than most pieces of technology going around.
Yes.
So that has been certainly helpful for you. But as a drummer, what have you, tell us a little bit about this, what we're about to hear. This is Pay Dirt in a Diamond Mine, which is a great title, by the way.
Yeah, yep.
Give us a sense of, do you want to give us a bit of background before we hit play?
Well, yeah, without sounding sort of pompous, I don't know if it was actually Glenn Fry from the Eagles who came up with this, or if it was, I'm pretty sure it was Glenn Fry talking about Jackson Browne.
Oh, yeah.
When Glenn Fry and Don Henley went to live in Los Angeles, they were living above or below Jackson Browne, and they heard him writing all day long. The kettle would go on, which is unusual for an American. He'd make himself a cup of tea, and then they'd say, God, now he started on that chorus again, and he's changed everything again.
Oh,
and so that was the first time, because I'm not a great book reader, I'm ashamed to say, but that was the first time I'd heard the fact that a great book isn't written, it's rewritten.
Yeah,
and so Glenn Fry said to me that Jackson had said, great songs aren't written, they're rewritten.
I like that.
And so I thought about that, and I thought, I'm going to put that lyric into this song, and then I built it backwards from there.
It's a beautiful line, and we'll talk a little more about your adventures in the world of music after this. But this is a new tune from Derek Pellicci, founding member of LRB, out on his own now, Flying, with Pay Dirt in a Diamond Mine. Welcome to the Human Race is the new album from my guest, Derek Pellicci. In fact, you've got 2 new albums this year. Am I right, Derek?
Yes. I said to my son, Joel, who helps me with all of the technical issues, younger mind, I said, I'm going to put up a second one. And I was saying to him driving in that I said, I think I've done about 100 tracks in the last year. And that's incredible because I know when we arrived at Montserrat, I heard you mention earlier.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, with George Martin, the Beatles, manager, the Beatles producer.
That was just such the 2 experiences. Most people say to me, what were the 2 greatest things?
Yeah.
Working with George when the Beatles were the whole inspiration in the first place.
That's right. Imagine that. Just the 11-year-old boy suddenly working with George Martin on Montserrat.
Yep. And then the other thing was playing for Charles and Diana down the road at the concert hall. And meeting Diana was just an amazing experience. So.
And you and I were just talking about the possibility of a memoir, and you said, why, David? Because all the memories are in the songs and all the stories are in the songs.
Yeah, they are. They are.
And because people have been listening in, and Paul from McKinnon, who loves his music. Hi, David. Axiom and Mississippi made the error of going to familiar territory, England, to gain international exposure. Little River Band, by looking towards the US, corrected this miscalculation.
Exactly.
You had a stellar tour. You were performing with pretty much the household names of music when you were over there, and worked your butts off too.
I said goodbye to my wife at the airport and said we'll be home in 2 months, and we were home in 5 months. I mean, that's a long time.
Any surprise why you wrote a song something like Home on a Monday?
Yes.
Is that the chapter that we're talking about there?
It's Glenn Shorrock being very clever. Glenn was a great lyricist, and that's exactly came from a phone conversation.
Yeah.
I'll be home on a Monday somewhere around noon.
That's a beautiful song. So many beautiful songs, whether it's Reminiscing or Cool Change, Lonesome Loser you mentioned, and then something like Curiosity Killed the Cat, which is how things kicked off. It's 8 minutes now to 9. David Astle enjoying conversation with Derek Pellicci, founding member of LRB, but has done so much else along the way, including, as you just heard there, working with George Martin, playing for Charles and Diana. You've been the curtain raiser for such acts as the Doobie Brothers, Jackson Browne. Really, it's a bit of a who's who.
Yep.
But you had a bit of a who's who moment yourself when you were over in London and you realised that there was a little quirk in your own family history. Tell me about that revelation, Derek.
Yeah, it was amazing. I came to Australia when I was 7 in 61, and then we went back with Mississippi, ironically, on the same boat that I came out on. I didn't even know that.
Really, the Fairstar?
The Fairstar.
You're kidding me.
The captain invited me to a cocktail party, and we were all perplexed as to why I was the only guy in the band that got invited. And I said, must be because of my Italian surname, quite naively, And then when I arrived and met the man, which was, great to meet the captain, and he said to me, no, you came out on this boat. We keep all the records. So it was fabulous. But anyway, when I went back to I was having a drink with a cousin, and he brought up in conversation, just dropped in there that I was adopted. And when I told him I didn't know anything about it, he was really shocked and upset and said, I hate to be the one to tell you. And I came back and spoke to my parents, and they said, yeah, what happened? And so I waited till...
You can't brush over that. Yeah, what happened? What did happen?
Well, no, I was going to say that I waited until my mum and dad had passed away. I sort of felt that I owed them that.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be sort of digging around and, But anyway, I had to get an adoption counsellor in London and do all this kind of stuff. And finally, I found out that I had been born to an Italian woman called Gladys Hadley. They'd sort of anglicised the name,
right.
And a guy called Ali Nadir, a Turkish guy, where my DNA now says that I'm probably from the Caucasus.
Wow.
Tbilisi. But I never met either parent, and I've written a lot of songs about that too as I get older. But so I was actually born, and I have 2 birth certificates. The first one said Ralph Hadley, which is what I was born, Gladys Hadley, Ralph Hadley. And then I don't think I'm a Ralph Hadley, but I think I'm a good Derek Pellicci.
You're a very fine Derek Pellicci. Have you felt as though that your own heritage, your own bloodline has strangely manifested in your work, creative or otherwise, before you even had that revelation, Derek?
Well, no, I do because I'm such a world music lover. I mean, look, I know that's not unusual. There's lots of people who are Anglo-Saxon who are world music lovers, but I really, really love it. I especially love the percussion. Some of the drums they use are incredible.
Yeah,
some of the
they are.
one-handed percussion that they do. And so it doesn't surprise me. And Tima said, you must go to Turkey.
Oh,
And
well,
I-
Tima would say that. She wants you to bring back some delight.
That's what it is.
Just don't get pulled up at the border, that's all. Neville's listening in. Hi, Derek. My best friend, Gary Porthouse, once told me you asked him if he was interested in playing bass in a band. You apparently told him the band didn't yet have a name. He was playing with Kush at the time and decided to stay with them. A month or two later, Little River Band were unveiled. Gary is still going okay, but has stopped playing full time. That's from Neville, who's sending on his regards.
Oh, okay. No, I know. I remember Gary very well. He was in one of the first bands I was in called the Ash.
Yeah.
Who had the distinction of playing naked at the Thumping Tum discotheque. Luckily, I missed that facet of their career. But that was the first record I ever made. We went into a little studio in Jolimont and we made a song called Midnight Witch, which has a great underground following in America. That song, it's turned up on a lot of heavy. I played a lot of different music before I came into Little River Band,
You
and
sure
I think
did.
that's what held me in
Black
good
Feather,
stead.
New
Black
Zealand
Feather,
Highway,
New Zealand,
Ireland, Arthur and the Argonauts.
Arthur and the Argonauts but a lot of it was heavy. We were playing Jethro Tull and Black Sabbath and Deep Purple music. So I think that held me in good stead with all the writers from Little River Band because it wasn't much of a stretch for me to do whatever they threw at me.
How's your hearing?
Bad. My wife says, get some hearing aids, please.
So does
But
my
there's
wife.
there's a little bit of, what do they call it, David? Selective hearing? I don't know.
I know there's a lot of that. But you're in good nick. Clearly, a man who's been drumming all his life you've got the guns, but I think you've been flying pretty clean as well by the looks.
Well, as I said to you before, I stopped in 1997 and I haven't really even held a pair of drumsticks since that time. People say to me, I cannot believe you don't drum anymore. And I said, honestly, I think I did really well with that gig. And I would now like to just leave a little bit of a legacy as a songwriter.
It's a who's who you've worked with. Colin Hay, Darryl Braithwaite, Stevie Wright, goes on and on, Renee Gayer. But I've got to ask you about, you also composed for a Japanese pop star, Yosui.
Yeah, Yosui.
How did that work out?
Well, I was in Los Angeles and a friend of mine, a co-writer, took me to meet a publisher and a female publisher. And she said, look, we have a Japanese songwriter here who wants to do an English album. And he sent us 10 songs. And we have 3 songs that no one could come up with anything. And we'll give you $250 for every song you can write to. I went home and knocked those 3 songs over, got my $750, didn't think anything about it.
And trying to get that Tricks on drum set back.
Yes. Someone's got it. Now, if anyone's listening that's got my tricks and kit, I'll pay double what you paid for it.
From the earnings of a Japanese pop star.
But anyway, so, shortly after I did this, forgot all about it. And then in the mail, got one of those beautiful packages that only the Japanese could do. And it was a cassette and it had a paper clip on my lyric. And one of my songs made the final album.
Brilliant.
And
Well
I thought, I'm going to make it as a singer, a songwriter at last. And because I make the comparison, it would have been like John Farnham doing a Japanese album. For this guy to do an English album, none of his fans wanted to hear an English album. So, one of my many disappointments.
The man with Caucasian Turkish heritage is big in Japan, ladies and gentlemen. Derek Pellicci, who's also skated. You've been on the ice rink, have you?
I have not skated. I said to Tima also, Tima's getting a big plug here tonight, guys.
She is, yes, she's great.
I said I wasn't a big sports fan when I was a kid. I didn't partake in things. I bought my own bike. I didn't get a bike when I was a kid.
You need to behave yourself because there's a whole lot of very beefy, burly ice hockey players. They're in the green room, so make sure you're polite on the way out,
I'll be very polite and make sure I fall at their feet.
Derek Pellicci has been my guest, and I hope you've enjoyed this scintillating chat. His new album is called, it's so hard to keep track of, but Welcome to the Human Race. God Help the USA is another songwriting thing to track down. And that track that we played a moment ago is Pay Dirt in a Diamond Mine. Derek Pellicci is the artist's name. Great to have you in, Derek.
David, it's been my absolute pleasure.